So it's a story of a farmer, and he lived in this small village. Now the farmer, he had one son and one horse. One day, the horse ran away. His neighbors come to him and they say, "Oh my goodness, how terrible, you lost your horse. You have nobody to plow your fields now." The farmer says, maybe not. A couple days later, the horse returns and brings with it 2 wild horses. The neighbors come and they say, "Wow, this is terrific. Look how rich you are in horses now." The farmer says, maybe not. A couple days later, his son is training one of these wild horses and he gets thrown off and he breaks his leg. The neighbors come and they say, "Oh, how tragic. Your son is crippled." Farmer says, maybe not. A war breaks out. Soldiers come to the small village to conscript young men for war and draft them. They see the young man with his broken leg and they spare him. They don't take him. The neighbors come again and say, "What blessing! Your son's life has been saved." And the old farmer answers, maybe not. What's my point? We have to be careful not to judge the end of a matter before it's time. Because that's the temptation that we can get into. Making judgments about our circumstances, about God, about what he's up to, before they've arrived at his end. And if we do that, especially if we base it on how I'm feeling, how favorably things are going for me, we can arrive at the wrong conclusion. And even more so, we can miss what God is inviting us into in the present moment. To live in faithful obedience in the midst of whatever we are facing in all things as we move through this life. Now, as we pick up in the story of Israel in the book of Exodus, Israel and Moses are in a place on their stories where they could easily misjudge things. Maybe God's messed up. Maybe he's not there. Maybe we took a wrong turn somewhere. It would be very easy to judge things before their end. So we pick up now in Exodus 2, verses 23 through 25, where Israel is still being oppressed in Egypt. Now the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery, and they cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and he knew. You hear those active verbs in there of what God's doing? See, if we paid attention to in the story so far, these are like, I'm moving to the edge of my seat now. I think God's going to do something. We've seen these verbs in the story before. See, God's not distracted. He's not distant. He's not aloof, somewhere way off. Sometimes we have that feeling though, don't we? And it comes back to something we said last week. That God is not so much as concerned about time as he is about timing. Peter writes, "Here is a fact, my beloved. One day, as to the Lord is 1,000 years. 1,000 years, as is one day." I hate that. Does that frustrate you, or am I the only one? But I need to be reminded of it. God's time is not my time. God's timing is better than my timing. But I hear a lot these days, you can get on the socials and you can scroll, God's gonna bless you. God's about to expand your kingdom. He's going to give you abundance. All right. There's truth in that. God is the God who wants to bless. He's the God who has a plan for your life. My hesitancy with that is 2 things. First of all, timing. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Well, you do this thing, you say that prayer, and then God's going to what? He's going to do it all of a sudden for you? Maybe. Maybe not. My second concern is the underlying assumption of this theology is that God is not working in my present moment unless things are going well. Unless I'm comfortable. That's that Western idolatry of being comfortable. That has less to do with the biblical narrative than some of the things that have gotten into our culture here in the West. God is not so concerned about our comfort. He's concerned about conforming us to the image and likeness of his Son. And that can hurt. That can be painful. Now, the unmistakable and interesting thing about Israel, where we find them in this story, is that they are uncomfortable. And that's an understatement. They're being oppressed. They are on the receiving end of the worst of what humanity has to offer. And they get there not because they sinned, not because they took some kind of wrong turn in the story somewhere, and now, like, man, this is just the consequences. This is where you guys ended up. You should have paid attention better. They're in Egypt suffering precisely because it is God's plan for them. Early in the story, when God is talking to Jacob in Genesis 46, he calls him Israel. So he says, "So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, 'Jacob, Jacob.' And he said, 'Here I am.' Then he said, 'I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes.'" So when Israel now, this is the father of Israel, taking his 12 sons, who are the 12 tribes of Israel, go down into Egypt, it's God's plan. And he says, "I'm going with you." The God who wants to bless, the God who wants to redeem, the God who wants to renew is taking them into Israel, leading them down into there, and Israel is being faithful in following. And that lands them smack dab in the middle of suffering. And as one author describes, suffering without explanation. It's the worst kind of suffering, isn't it? How do we do with that? Like, not for Israel, but for us. Yeah, not so good. It's one thing to praise and to trust and to surrender to God when things are going well, when we got all the good feels and the goosebumps. But what about when they're not? What about when we're confronted with disappointed? The seemingly silence of unanswered prayers, tragic and tremendous loss. Then what? Will we still trust? Will we still surrender? Will we still bless his name? We say we want to be like Jesus, but which Jesus? The Jesus that suffered? Peter's preaching in Acts has this to say about Jesus' suffering. It wasn't his sin. It wasn't a wrong turn. This Jesus delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. I would almost translate it the determined counsel of God. God's proskenosos, his pre-arrangement. God arranged the suffering. It's within his plan. God suffers his people, and there are times and seasons where that's his plan for us. And how we suffer, that matters. Enduring, not giving up hope, still praying, not judging things before their end, but also knowing that there is something on the back end of it. God's not done with us in the midst of our suffering. Even Peter going on and speaking of Jesus' suffering and his death, he goes on to say, God raised him up, loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it. Now that word pangs, who talks like that anymore? Y'all know that word? Hey, how you doing today? Oh, man, just got me some pangs. I don't know, you might want to call a doctor for that. No, hodinos in the Greek. The interesting thing, talking about Jesus' suffering and death, and he uses the language of the pains that come with labor and childbirth and new life. Through the pangs of suffering is going to come rebirth, is going to come new life. There is something on the back end of this thing. The same is true for Israel. When you go back to Genesis 46, you will be in Egypt, but I'm going to bring you up out of there. But the timing of that, well, that's not going to be pleasant. So what I want you to hear this morning is no matter how amount of time you've been going through a struggle, a hardship, a heartache, a loss, don't give in. Don't give up. Don't assume God's not working. He is. He is there. And don't stop asking or praying. This is what Israel does. 400 years in this business, and nothing changes things. Time doesn't change things. There's a regime change. There's a new king that comes into power in Egypt. Politics don't change things. I wonder if there's a small word in there for us today. We like our politics, don't we? Well, God is very much concerned with politics and the polis and the city. In fact, when he's redeeming Israel, he's redeeming them and their political structures to be a standalone nation state. We need to be involved in politics. You're going to rule and legislate from some sort of worldview. There are truth claims in this world. But the temptation and the mistake is, one is either not to get involved, not have winsome and wise voices who can apply biblical ethics to legislation to bring about goodness and beauty and restrain evil. But the other error is if we think that's the main lever, like that's the thing, we can legislate the human heart, we can pull that lever, that's how we're going to get change in the world. No, it's not our primary weapon as the church. It's not our primary tool. It's prayer. And not just any kind of prayer. Emotional, intense prayer. It's what we see here in the account. The people groan, they shriek, they cry out for help. 3 different words here used in the Hebrew. Anah, there's this groaning. In the Greek translations, it's stigmaxmo. It gets used in Romans 8. In the midst of suffering, Paul is still talking about there is a pain, a labor pain, giving way to new birth. And he says that we stenazo, we groan, and then the Spirit stegnazos for us, groans on our behalf with wordless prayer before the throne of heaven. That kind of prayer. Za'ak, almost an onomatopoeia. Za'ak, to cry out, almost in terror, in horror, what's happening. And then shawah, to cry out for help. God, we need help. We need you to do something. And then here comes our verbs. What does God do? Are you ready? God heard. God remembered. God saw. And God knew. These verbs have been used throughout the Genesis account. God remembered Noah and all the beasts of the earth. God remembered Abraham for the sake of Lot. God remembered Rachel and her barrenness. God saw the affliction of Leah. He saw the suffering of Jacob. God heard the affliction of Hagar. He heard the cries of her infant son. God heard the cries and the prayers of Rachel and Leah. And in each one of these cases, he doesn't just see, he doesn't just hear, he doesn't just remember. He moves in and he does something about it to remedy the situation. He dries up the water, lets the ark come to rest on dry land. He spares Lot, Abraham's brother, for the sake of Abraham. Miraculously provides life-saving water for Hagar and her child in the desert. He made a way through and righted the wrongs that Jacob had experienced. He blesses Rachel and Leah with children. God hears. Shema. I've been on this before. Shema, whenever you see hear or listen or obey in your Old Testaments, it's the same word. Because in Hebrew, if you have heard, but then you don't put into action what you have heard, you never heard in the first place. When God hears, it means he's about to act. He's about to do something upon what he has heard. And God remembered his covenant, his promises to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. He sees, he's taken inventory of the situation. And he knew. Yada in the Hebrew. At its core, the intimate knowledge of the relations between a husband and a wife. It's an experiential type knowledge and knowing. God doesn't know from afar. He knows up close. He's intimately acquainted with your hurts, with your heartaches, with your broken dreams, with what you're going through, with what you're suffering. I mean, think about that. The Creator doesn't just know that, he opens himself up to experiencing it and feeling it with us. He's the God who is close. But the key word for me here is remember, tizacher. And not just any kind of remember, and it's like, oh man, I forgot about those poor fellows down there in Egypt. It's a covenantal term. God remembered his covenant. Again, another action term. If God remembers the covenant, he's about to act in accordance with and faithfulness to his covenant. Now, I've heard that people say, well, covenant that's one of the lenses through which you can read Scripture. I will argue, I won't make the case right now, but it is the lens to read Scripture. The whole Bible is organized around covenant. God makes a covenant with Adam, a covenant with Noah, a covenant with Abraham. Gets passed down to Isaac and Jacob. He renews that covenant with David. And all of these covenants and their administration gets fulfilled in Jesus. Jeremiah 31, God promises, I will give a new covenant, or depending how you want to translate it, a renewed covenant. There's continuity there. What does Jesus say? Speaking of his own blood that's poured out at the Last Supper. This is my blood of the new covenant. Our entire Bibles are organized in Old and New Testament. That goes way back to the early church, 1st century. Testamentum in the Latin translates diatheke, covenant, the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. And in these first 5 books of the Bible, it's the Mosaic covenant that stands at the center of the whole thing, of what happens at Mount Sinai. It's where Jesus gets his language, not just from Jeremiah 31, but when Jesus speaks of, this is my blood of the new covenant, poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sins, right back in Exodus 24 in the covenant renewal ceremony. Covenants define the relationship. It's like a marriage covenant. What are the expectations? What are the responsibilities? What are the privileges? How do we behave in such a way that we not only maintain the relationship, but enjoy it in all of its goodness? God has chosen to bind himself to his creation and his creatures through covenant and a promise. A promise that he will not renege on, a promise that he will never fail, a promise that he will always keep. And at the heart of this covenant promise, as you start tracing its development throughout the scriptures, even in Genesis, there's something that's right at the core of it. You know what it is? I will be with you. It's a promise of his presence. And that promise, that covenant promise of his presence, is actually embedded in God's personal name. Do you know God has a personal name? We like names. Do y'all still think about names? I know my wife and I, when we named our kids, we were intentional. We had Annabelle, Beautiful Grace, Jude, Yud, raised the hand in praise, and then Jacob. We knew God had just spoke to my wife and said, we're going to have this little guy. So we named him Yaakov, Jacob, God calling into existence that which was not. He had a plan for this little life. Anybody else? Can I put somebody on the spot? My good buddy Matthew. We were talking about your kids' names the other day in kids' ministry, because man, what beautiful names. You want to share a little bit? You guys are intentional in names. You want to say something?
Yeah, so Liliana, Sofia, so in Italiano, right, you have this idea of a flower, a lily, as we call her, and Sophia, which is in Greek, which is wisdom. And then we, keeping with the Italiano, My name's Matthew, and so we wanted to start down the trek of the Gospels. So my son Marco, maybe he'll name his son Luke or Luca, and then so forth and so on. So that's how we kind of came to those names.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you. We have this impulse in us that names matter, that they mean something. And I believe that's something that God himself has put into us. We've seen this, you see it in Genesis, we've seen it in the Exodus account with Moshe, with Gershom, names that have meaning. So it is also with God's name. So I want to move us now into, we're going to leave Israel and Egypt, and we're going to move to Moses, who's out in the desert, and he is going to have an encounter with God's name. But I'm going to read the text because it is the Word of God. That's what we came here to feed on. So it's going to be a little bit of a longer one. If you have your Bibles, chapter 3, the first 15 verses. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush. Moses, Moses! And he said, Hineni, here I am. Then he said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings. And I have come down to deliver them out of the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come up to me. And I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you is singular there, you shall serve God on this mountain. That's plural. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what's his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Now there's a lot in here. But where do we encounter Moses? What's he doing? He's sheep herding, watching his father-in-law's sheep. He's in shepherding school. And it would be really easy for Moses to misjudge things at this point. And maybe he does. When you look at this interaction, maybe he is a little bit beaten down emotionally and spiritually, because that desert's not easy on anyone. But this is how God works. Before he entrusts his people with leadership, he trains them in humility and endurance and often in obscurity, putting you in situations where you feel like you're not seen, where you're alone, even where God might be distant. Because the shepherd training is really about soul training. And this is where God is training up Moses. I don't know how well Moses knows his ancestry here at this point, but there might be some hope in that, finding himself out in the desert tending sheep, because he's got an ancestor, Jacob. Jacob also found himself in exile, a different part of the desert, up more north, doing what? Tending his father-in-law's sheep. And God was preparing Jacob to be the father of the nation of Israel. Here, we see God preparing Moses to be the deliverer of Israel, leading sheep in the desert, preparing to lead the sheep of God out into the desert. So he's got these sheep. He's headed west at this point, which means he's leaving Midian. He's looking towards the west. You know what's out west? Out in the distance? Egypt. His people. The people that are still being oppressed. The people that we already know he has a heart for wanting to deliver, for wanting to end that oppression, to free them. And it's at this point he comes to the mountain of God, Mount Horeb. Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, like this is the mountain. You know, like Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments mountain? That's this mountain. Mountains in the ancient Near East were places of sacred ground, the high places. That's the place where heaven and earth meet. See, in Hebrew, the heavens, shamayim, you hear that im, that's a plural ending. The heavens had 3 references in the Hebrew Old Testament. Refers to the sky, the visible sky around us. But then another layer up, the visible stellar heavens, that of the stars and the planets. But then shamayim also refers to the invisible realm of creation. The realm of God and his dwelling and that of his angels. Mountains are the place where heaven and earth meet and you commune with deity and the divine. Even the Garden of Eden, where God's special dwelling was, Ezekiel later prophesies and ties that to being the mountain of God. But here Moses comes to the mountain, and there's the angel of the Lord that appears himself, that causes himself to be seen by Moses in a flame of fire in the midst of the bush. Now, fire often in the Old Testament is representation of the presence of God. We've seen fire already up in the story at the very beginning, though. The first time, you know where we see flaming fire? After the couple sins and rebels in the garden. God puts a guard around his sacred Holy of Holies in the garden, the place where there's the tree of life. Nobody's getting back into there without a death. Nobody's getting through those flaming swords without a sacrifice. But this story is so much bigger than what's going on here. We have the flaming presence of God once again, and he's inviting Moses to draw near. It's almost as if God is redeeming the fall, getting us back to the experience of Adam and Eve to commune with him once again, to draw near to his presence. And he's holy, he's powerful, he's mighty, but do you pay attention how easy God makes it for him to approach him? He doesn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. Moshe, take your sandals off. And what does God say to Moses? So we can read it too fast. That's what I do. I read fast. I'm like, I assume I know what the text says. Oh, he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's not what he says. Did you catch it? Abraham, I'm the God of your father. Abraham, I'm the God of your dad. The dad in Egypt. I know your longings. I know your identity. I see you. You're a Hebrew. I know your longings to go back and to free your people. Even if those have been stuffed down somewhere over the years. God says, I still see them. I still know they're there. And the Lord says, I've seen the affliction. I've heard their cry. I know their sufferings. I have come down to deliver them. Bring them up out of the land of Egypt, up to the land I have promised. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh. Now, a couple of things in here. We'll talk about Moses' response in just a second. How many actors, how many speakers do we have in this account? Anybody want to take a shot at it? How many? I see you smiling. You've got something. How many? Come on. 3. Is that everybody else's answer? 3? We've got the angel of the Lord. We've got Elohim. We've got Moses. And then right in verse 7, we have just Yahweh again. What do we do with that? Should we talk about it? Are you interested? All right, next week. I got to keep you coming back for the word somehow. We'll get into that. We'll tear it apart a little bit. But watch Moses' response. Hineni, here I am. God says, Moshe, Moshe. He says, here I am. I am surrendered. God, whatever you have for me, I am available. I am open. Come, I want you to go to Pharaoh. You're going to free my people. Well, I didn't really mean like I was open to anything. Moses starts to backtrack a little bit. It's like, you got to slow your roll. Like, who am I to go down to Egypt and bring your people out? And God answers. Let's pay attention to how God answers Moses' objection here in this question of like, who am I? Exodus 3:12. But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. And I was kind of inserted this really quietly when I was reading it, but that first you there, when you, Moses, that's in singular, when you bring the people out, then you all will worship here on this mountain, and that will be your sign. Now notice what God doesn't do. He doesn't give Moses like the pep talk. Moses, you got this. I've been raising you up for this. You had all that elite training back in Egypt. You know how the royal court works. I have that desert training. You are the man for the job. I have equipped you. You got this, son. Nope. Moses, it's not about you. God's answer to Moses' insecurity, I will be with you. It's the presence of God that will give success in being faithful to the things he has called us to do. He never tells Moses, hey, Moses, you're enough. He only says that he's enough. Now we'll see God equipping him along the way. But God never promises that up front. He never says, I'm going to equip you for this or anything else. He just says, I will be with you. And he goes, and I'm going to give you a sign too, and here will be the sign that I've sent you. Here's how you're going to know that I'm with you. You're going to worship on this mountain. That's certainly an interesting sign, isn't it? Like if you're Moses, do you want the sign like after you do the hard thing or before you do the hard thing? I want it before I do the hard thing. Wait a minute, no, give me the sign now, and then maybe we'll talk about the hard thing. It's not how God works. It's not his MO. He says, no, you take that step of faith and you do the hard thing, and I'm going to give you another sign along the way that you're within my purpose and my will. But I don't want us to miss this. The sign afterwards is going to be a sign to Moses of, hey, when this thing happens and you bring my people out, things are going to seem a little wonky still. So we might get into this mindset of, man, I've said yes to God and things are good, and from here on out, it's up and to the right. No challenges, no feeling inadequate, great success, favorable circumstances. Nope. That would be to misjudge things. Often it's, oh my, we're still going up, but there's some dips. And oftentimes, those setbacks, those frustrations, those challenges, those feelings of not being enough, that's every bit of God's plan. In fact, that might be the indicator that you're within it and you have to rely on him. Is he still doing something? Is he still moving? Yeah, he is. And we trust that he is. But we have to be careful not to judge things by how we feel about it, but in our faithfulness in all things to what God has called us to. And what's going to happen when God leads Egypt, or Israel out of Egypt, he's not taking them the straight, direct path out that you think he would take. He's going to take them the long way around the barn, the indirect route. And so by the time they get to the mountain, it's going to feel like, uh-oh, maybe we messed up. Maybe we're off course. Maybe we got this thing wrong somewhere. And now there's challenges and everything else. I don't know if this God is still with us. Moses, that's your sign. If you're at the mountain, you've got the people with you, that's the sign that I'm with you. And this is working. This is precisely my plan. It's God's promises. They're the indicator of reality. If you're here, no matter what it seems like, this thing seems wonky, it's not. It's what I have for you, Moses. That's going to be the sign. Don't trust the feelings of being off course. Your litmus test is not your feelings, it's your faithfulness to continue walking what I've given you to do. Faithful obedience. So Moses says, all right, say I do this, and I go to the people, and the God of your fathers, and I say this all to them. The God of your fathers sent me. What if the people be like, well, what's his name? A weird question. Why does Moses anticipate this? All sorts of different speculations among theologians. I don't know that we have a good answer. But I do think if we look at the context and we look at the phraseology here, we can shed some light on this. See, they're not asking, like, what's his name? It's not like, hey, what's this guy's name right here? Oh, that's Mike. In the Hebrew, if you're going to ask what's his name in that sense, you would say, Mi Shemeka, what's your name? But if you want to ask something differently, if you want to say, okay, I know this is Mike, but what's Mike about? What's his nature? Who is he? What does his name reveal about him? I don't say, Mi Shemeka. I say, Ma Shemeka. They knew the name Yahweh. It's already appeared multiple times in the story. They knew what his name was. But what revelation, Moses, do you bring of Yahweh? Why might they ask that? I don't know. 400 years in silence? Being enslaved? Hardship? What do you say about this God? Where's he been? Oh, he's showing up now? What revelation do you bring? God says, okay, if they ask you this question about who I am and my nature, here's what you say to them. I am who I am. Oh, well, good. That clears things up. I guess we're on our way now. God says, tell them I am has sent me to you. This is where God's personal name gets its fuller meaning. And his name, Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, or Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, depending how you want to pronounce it, gets connected with the verb in Hebrew to be. And it's almost a pun on it of I am. His personal name is wrapped up with this I am. He is. He's the God that can't be defined, the God who is indescribable, the God who is powerful, the God who stood before creation, the God who spoke this all into existence. But there's more. There's a promise. In Yahweh's name is a promise, and it's the promise of his presence. See that? Ayer, asher, ayer. I will be who I will be. It's the imperfect verb form in Hebrew. Now, the imperfect, the problem when it comes to translating is it's incredibly versatile. It can refer to past, it can refer to present continuous action, or it can refer to future. So translators just have a heyday with this. It means I am who I was, I shall be, and the list goes on and on and on, all the combinations. How I would translate this. As I was, so shall I be to you. And you look at the context, what he's talking about, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Just as I was to Abraham, just as I was to Isaac, just as I was to Jacob, I will be to you. Just as I never let them down, just as I was faithful, just as I took Abraham out of Egypt, I will now do the same. But even more. He's the God who will be with us. But it's a covenant promise. What's the covenant been about so far? It goes back to Abraham. I'm going to give you a people and I'm going to give you a land. Well, we've got people. We're still looking for that land. God is saying to Moses, I'm going to be with you just as I was to them, but even more. You're going to see things they never even saw. This story is going to widen up and go even further. You're going to see more of the covenant promise of the land come into view. Strap in. It's going to get exciting. And you're going to get a fuller revelation of who Yahweh, the great I am, is. So the promise, just as with to Abraham, just as was to Isaac and Jacob, I will be to you, and even more. So we're going to stop there today. I'm going to invite our worship team to come up and lead us in one last praise before the King.